I want to start off with this video with a quick disclaimer that just because this is a video about my personal choice to not have children, this is in no way, shape, or form any kind of criticism or judgment on anyone that has children, is planning to have children, or is dreaming of have children, or currently trying to have children. It is a 100% personal choice of mine that I just would like to release some stigma on today, but I am not here to cast any kind of judgment on anyone else's personal choice to have children, because it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, decisions you can make in life. And I think, like anything, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm a big believer in personal choice and curating your own adventure on this time on this planet. So for those of you who have children or are hoping to, this is not any kind of shame on you whatsoever. This is just my personal journey to discover why I don't want to have children and why I am living this current truth in my life. So here we go. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, how did I come to know that I don't want children? Well, growing up, I never really had some kids growing up, they feel pressure from their parents kind of earlier on as they are in their teen years or early 20s of, oh, I can't wait to see those grandchildren, or when you're gonna find a nice husband or wife and start making those babies. That was absolutely not part of the conversation in my household. My father was very encouraging of my dreams and really pushed me to pursue audacious things, and I'm super grateful for that. But as far as starting a family and having kids, that was never a conversation that was on my radar. So I really honestly just didn't think about it that much. And then as far as, when I was a little girl playing with toys, baby dolls just never really did it for me. I think maybe we had some in the house at some point, but I never played the pretend thing of like nursing the baby or changing the baby or playing house. I did have a Barbie, and me being the minimalist that I am, I just wanted one Barbie. I had for a long time, raise your hand if you 90s kids remember Totally Hair Barbie. She was the coolest. That was my Barbie, and instead of playing house with that Barbie or have the Barbie get married or have the Barbie be pregnant like some girls like to do, I had the Barbie ride on a horse, and she had a backpack, and she would go on adventures, and that was my game. She was always kind of off in the wild doing something, and if I played imaginary games by myself, I was doing something similar. I always just fantasized just having this backpack and being off in the world on adventures or helping save people in natural disasters. And maybe it's weird that I thought about that as a kid, and I don't know why I'm wired like that. No one in my family is a minimalist at all, but that's just where my head was at as a kid, and turns out that's kind of what my life has become to a certain extent. I'm not off saving the world right now, but there's definitely a lot more volunteer type humanitarian work I would like to do. I'll get to that later in the video. But yeah, so the whole starting a family thing was never ever on my radar or something I thought about growing up. And then fast forward to my 20s, when I was 23, I got into a serious, I hate that word, it's so weird, a committed relationship with someone. He was a little bit older than me. I was 23, he was 30. So he was definitely at the age where it was normal to have those conversations of, yes, we're in a committed relationship, should we start a family? But I was young, and I was, when he would say, oh, you'd be such a great mom, or let's start a family, I was like, oh, I'm too young. And it definitely seemed like something very far away from what I would do. But it's still, for as much as it was never a conversation in my household growing up, it's funny how societal conditioning works, because I still thought I had to do it. It was just like, oh, not yet, but I'll get to that later. And that's okay. I think some people do go through a timeline of when they're young, they don't think about it, and then something hormonally or just consciousness shifts later where they're like, oh yeah, okay, I want to do this now. But for me, it was like, seemed like the furthest thing from my reality that I could or would want to do. But as the relationship progressed and I was age 30 and he was 37, it really was time to have that conversation. And it was the first time I really had to come face to face of like, do I want this? And as I sort of started to unpack it and felt when you're 30, you know a bit more who you are than when you're 23. And I came to realize that I actually really don't want it. And because he did that was a big sort of keystone to the relationship transitioning to end, but it turns out there were a lot of other reasons underlying as well. And now we're great friends, and it was the right thing to separate, but that was a catalyst. And that was, so at age 30, that was the first time in my life I really had to ask, like, tune in with myself, like, is this something that I want? And it's funny, like a year before I asked that question, or had to ask that question, I worked with someone. She was getting married and they were going on their honeymoon, and someone had asked the question, like, oh, when are you guys gonna, start making a family? And she was like, oh, hell no, never. Like, he has a vasectomy, we have a dog, we are not going down that road, we do not want children, and we are so happy to not want children. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a couple say that. And not that there weren't people doing it, but it's just, everyone around me was getting married and starting to have a family. And that was literally the first time I had heard a couple express that they were happily choosing to be child-free. And I remember when she said that, this like twinge went off in me, this switch flipped of like, oh, I can do that? Like, that's an option? And it's crazy because that's just how societal pressure and conditioning works. Like I said, I didn't grow up with that pressure, but I still, just because of the conglomerate of thinking around me and what everyone's sort of doing the same thing around me, I thought that I had to do it. And so that little conversation just planted this seed of like, oh, there's another option. I don't have to do this thing that, like, deep down I knew I actually didn't want to do. And then so a year later, when that conversation came up, and it was really hard, to separate from someone you've been in a relationship with for 7 years. But I think there's a lot of compromise that can happen in a relationship, or needs to happen, but having children is a really difficult thing to compromise on, because you don't want to take that dream away from someone, but also you don't want to force someone into having a child that isn't ready for it, or just flat out doesn't want it. And that's what I discovered, is that I flat out didn't want it. And as far as reasons why, there are a lot of myths out there and misconceptions as to why people don't want them. Because even though it's becoming more popular, you definitely see more videos on the internet of people choosing to be child-free. It's still the automatic assumption that you will, unless proven otherwise. So there's a lot of misconceptions of why people don't, that are just based in falsehood, or the idea that it's still wrong, or a poor or bad or sad choice to not do that. So I will go through those myths right now and sort of dispel them. These may be true reasons for other people. I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sort of going to dispel these myths and then get to the end of why I really just actually don't want to at the end of that. So myth number 1, I hate kids. This is not true. I actually have worked professionally with children for 10 years. I was a competitive synchronized swimming coach. I worked mostly with middle school and high school kids, but sometimes the younger tots, which that takes some extra patience. And I absolutely loved it. I considered it an honor and a privilege to help raise these little beings. I wasn't there to just teach them about how to be better about the sport. That was actually the least interesting thing. I was there to help develop their minds, their emotions, their hearts, their spirits, and help them to be the best version of themselves and take that best version into the world. And as a coach, you have a particular responsibility, because oftentimes when it's a sport they really love and they've chosen for themselves, they look up to you a lot more than their school teachers, because most kids don't love going to school, it's forced. And a lot of kids, even though parents, you try so very hard, there's still friction, especially when they get to teenage rebellion years. And so oftentimes these kids listened more to me than they would their teachers or their parents. So I considered it a super high responsibility to give my very best to these kids and make sure they're being nurtured properly. And I absolutely loved it. I'm currently not teaching, but it will be something that always ebbs and flows out of my life, even if it's just volunteering, because it's a joy for me to work with children and see them grow and develop. So no, I do not hate children. That is myth number 1. Myth number 2, I will want to when I get older. Well, okay, that maybe would have worked when I had this conversation, or was, first being asked by my boyfriend to have children at 23 years old, but I'm 39, I turned 40 in a couple months. I am biologically near the end of when my body would be able to do this anyway, but even if I could still conceive, I still don't want to. And I think I'm old enough to know that it's still what I don't want. And I was age 30. It was 2014. So this has been almost exactly 10 years of when I made this firm decision for myself. And I can honestly say that there has not been one fraction of a millionth of a percent of doubt ever. There has not been one time when I saw a beautiful pregnant lady or a really happy family or a super cute kid and thought, maybe, just maybe, oh, but what if? Like, nope, not beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I'm thankful for that. My heart goes out to people who really are unsure or who want to conceive but haven't found the right partner or don't have the money or have physical infertility problems. Like, there's so much heartache that can go along with that. So my heart goes out to those people. But for me personally, this idea of like, oh, but you might change your mind. If it hasn't wavered in 10 years, it's not going to waver. And it's actually just gotten more and more certain over time. And because you definitely, as you get older, you know yourself more. And again, there's not been one fraction of a shadow of a doubt in the past 10 years ever. So myth number 3, I will want to when I have the right partner. Well, I was with the right partner. It's, ultimately, as I said, there were other reasons why it was correct for us to separate. But at the time, we were very much in love. We both had good jobs with stable incomes, and he very much wanted to have a child. I know it's kind of a stigma that more men want, or more women want to have children than men. And oftentimes it's the woman pushing for a child and the man kind of pushing back. That's a stigma in society, but that's not always the case. It was reversed in my case. It was a man who was a grown man at 30 and had a good paying job and loved me, and we had a good home, and he was like, let's do this. And I was like, I don't want to. And he's a very nurturing and kind and loving person and would have made a good father. So it was not like I was just needed to meet the right person. It was just, I had all those things on paper correct, and I still did not want to. Myth number 4, I will want to have a child if I spend time around a newborn. Well, my nephew was born last year, and I was there for the birth and the first week of his life. And it was a magical, incredible, and beautiful, and very tiring, but amazing experience that I'm so blessed I got to share with my sister and my brother-in-law and my little nephew. And I bonded with him so much. I love him so dearly, and it's so amazing to see him grow into this little being. And my sister and brother-in-law are doing such an amazing job, and I'm so proud of them for this incredible being they're bringing into the world. But even after all that, nope, it did not evoke a desire to have a child in me. I hate to say it pushed me further from it, because that's not the truth, because it was still a beautiful experience, and I'm so grateful I get to be his auntie. But it did not evoke any sort of wondering or questioning of like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, and I love this little baby so much, I want to have my own. No, it did not do that for me. Myth number 5, sorry. A lot of people think, oh, but if you have enough money, then it'll be easier. Well, yes, it takes a lot of money to raise a child, but money is not everything. My heart goes out to families that are struggling to get by in this world today while raising a child, because it's so expensive, and rent is incredibly expensive. There's inflation. Jobs are very shaky. Like, it's a very, very sketchy, difficult time to raise a child, but there are a lot of other factors that go into raising a child too, like love and nurture and stability and mental well-being, and the list goes on. But even if you wrote me a check for $10 million today and put this magical partner in front of me that was ready to be a good dad and said everything was all taken care of and said, oh, here's a check for a free college for that kid too, like, no, I still would not want to. It's not about the money for me at all. Myth number 6. Sorry, I'm trying to read my own handwriting here. Oh, this is super common in the minimalism space too, and the vegan space, of this argument of, well, the world is going to shit, so we shouldn't be bringing more children into it. And I think that's crap. First of all, that's really insulting to people who do want to have children, who it is their biggest dream, to people who are having children. Not everyone chooses to have children. That happens, and sometimes that can be very difficult, but also a miracle, and probably a little bit of both. I think that, but just the idea of like, well, the world is going to blow up because everything's going to crap, and Trump's going to be in office and the rainforest is burning, so let's just give up. Like, no, that sucks. Like, we created a lot of these problems, if not all of them, but we can fix them too. And to just sort of give up and say the world's going to shit is a total cop-out and not a good enough reason in my book, because it is a beautiful thing to have a family for those that want it. And there are, you can, even though there's so much you can't control, you can still give your best to give love and care and attention to this person that will maybe have a consciousness that can shift the world. And it's hypocritical for those of us who don't want children to say, don't shame me for not wanting a child, but then turn around and shame people for wanting a child. Like, no, that's not the point of this. The point is live and let live. And I would never say to someone who is excited about starting a family, like, how can you do that? How can you bring just another resource muncher into the world? And or shame people because there's sadly millions of, if not billions of kids that need adoption. Yes, it would be wonderful if all of those children could find home, but there is a very spiritual experience of conceiving a child and as a woman carrying a child and going through that magic. And if someone wants to have that on their life journey, that is okay. So it's not about, I mean, yes, there are so many problems in the world, but I am not withholding a desire to have a child simply because of those problems in the world. I want to help alleviate those problems in the world, but I'm not suppressing some inner desire to be a mother just so I can make the world a bigger place. It's really, I just don't have that desire. Myth number, whatever, forget the numbers, I've lost count here, but another myth, I will regret when I'm older. Well, I can't predict the future. I don't know who I'm going to be at 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, if I even have the privilege of living that long. But given that I've had no shift in the past 10 years and I am now approaching my biological expiration, when exactly that happens, I don't know. But I turned 40 in June, so I'm close to it in some regard. I don't know how I will feel in the future, but I do know that as the years go by, I have come more and more to know myself, and there are certain fundamental truths that just don't shift at all, that don't waver, that aren't swayed by public opinion. And it's really hard for me to imagine that in 10 years, I'll regret this decision when it feels so much like a fundamental core truth. Just like it's very hard for me to imagine that in 10 years, I'll all of a sudden want to eat meat again when I haven't eaten meat since I was 11 years old. Or in 10 years that I'll all of a sudden want to be a maximalist and have all this shit in my house when I live very, very simply. Like, there's just no way in my head. And even if you told me that it's still a possibility that at 65, I'll wake up one day and say, I'm alone, I didn't have a kid. Well, that's a fragment of a possibility, but I would rather live with the possibility of regretting having a child than have a child and regret having that child. And that sounds super harsh, but it's the truth. I think, again, not everyone plans to have a family, but if you can make the choice, it needs to be a very conscious choice. And of course, nobody's ready for it. And you can do everything right in the world, but there's so much out of your hands that you can control. But I think you should really want to have a child if you are actively choosing to go down that route. And for me to sort of actively push to have a child just because I might regret being alone one day, like, I don't think that's the case at all. First of all, I spend most of my time alone already. I'm a classic Sigma female. I'm just out in the woods doing my thing. So I do not fear being alone. I do not fear, not getting a call on my birthday because I don't have kids or grandkids. It's just not part of my mental or emotional state. Another myth, fear of not being good enough as a parent. I've been told of like, oh, don't be scared. Like you'll be great. You'll be a great mother. You're so organized. You're so loving. You're so caring. You're so attentive. You're such a, great female role model, whatever. So like, don't be scared of your shortcomings. You'll be able to do it. And it's not that. It's not that I want one, but I'm scared I won't do a good enough job. It's really just, I just don't want to. I have a pretty good amount of confidence in my abilities as a teacher, and I've gotten great feedback of what I've done with children over the years. Am I perfect? Of course not, but no parent is perfect. But I feel good about what I gave to those kids, and especially as I got older through those 10 years that I was coaching. And it's not at all this fear of, oh, I want a kid, but I think I'd do a bad job. That's not the case for me at all. And moving on to the last myth that I have heard, this one hit a particular chord because there's this idea that with me specifically, I've heard, because I didn't grow up with my mother, that, oh, the reason you don't want your own child is because you didn't have a mother yourself. And I can see how from the outside that absolutely would be a connect the dots Freudian, like, of course, well, but that's still operating under the presumption that because I don't want a child, there is something wrong or broken in me. And did I have to heal from my own childhood experiences and go through certain things? Yes, but I also had an amazing father that was loving and nurturing and pushed me to do wonderful things. And he has 4 sisters that were in my life and gave me wonderful nurturing. My grandmother was in my life. I was not devoid of nurturing. I just had a slightly different experience than some kids. And I have done a lot of healing work with that. Am I on the other end and have I arrived at healing? No, because there's no such thing. Healing is a lifelong journey for everyone. And I think it's kind of a dangerous mindset to say, oh, I've got it all figured out. I'm all healed now. Like, that's when in Zen they say if your cup is full, like nothing new can come in. So healing is a lifelong journey, but I have come a long way. And with that particular issue, it's still, again, thinking, that because I don't want a child, it's because that in and of itself is something wrong or broken that needs to be healed. And once I heal this, childhood karma, then I will want one. Well, I can tell you, after years and years of healing work and feeling in a good spot, I still don't want a child, because at the end of the day, all of that aside, the main reason I don't want one is I just don't want one. And I wish people could understand that. And I think a lot of people do. But I have seen on the internet, there's this stigma that as a woman, I'm not fulfilling my biological purpose if I don't become a mother. And there's this sadness behind that. And then, but just as what even gets more pushback, and I would like to shed light on, is there's a huge stigma against men too, because it's, biologically a man and a woman making a child, whether it's in vitro or surrogate or whatever, sperm and an egg. There is a huge stigma against men that say they want to get married, but they do not want children, that they are somehow shirking their responsibility as a man and they should be shamed because they're, not owning it, not being responsible. And I say that's crap. It is perfectly okay for a woman to not want a child. It is perfectly okay for a man to not want to have a child. It's just a conversation you have to have when you enter into partnership. Like, are we on the same page about this? But this idea that having a child is the end all be all highest purpose in life, I don't subscribe to that. For some people it may be, and that's beautiful and wonderful. But if you watched my other videos, I'm all about finding your own journey, finding your own ride. And if we can just let each other live and let live and not push our own values and expectations and what we think is right onto other people, then we could just chill out a little bit more. I mean, for me, there's no sadness in not having a child. I don't feel like, oh, I drew the I don't want a kid card. Like, my life is very abundant and I want it to grow more abundant. And it's not like I want to just sit and drink margaritas on the beach and enjoy my no kid lifestyle. I want to do stuff. I want to help people. It's my children are my students I teach. My children are the animals I want to help by being vegan and sharing information on that for those who are wanting information on it. My children is the environment. Why I'm such a passionate minimalist, for me, it's not just about aesthetic, it's about retooling the way we use resources on this planet, because it is out of control. And I do want to help the natural world and maintain this beauty. And I want to help the people that are living on this planet, because if we do go at the pace we're going, we won't sustain ourselves. And there are so many people out there that need help. That's why I want to work for Red Cross. I want to do Habitat for Humanity, like those, and help people in that way. Those are my other children. And that's just that is my path. And that feels like a deep truth to me. And I don't feel, just because I'm not living the American adult dream or the world dream of like get married and start a family, I don't feel like my life will be any less purposeful or abundant. So that's the video for today. Thank you for listening. Whether you have kids or want to have kids or are hoping or planning to have kids, I wish you the best. But if you are on the fence and feel pressure to have children, but know in your heart it might not be the path for you, please listen to yourself, because at the end of the day, it is your life and it's yours to curate, regardless of what everyone else says around you. Okay, that's the video for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.